Well, it's time now for our keynote address. As a management scientist, our keynote speaker, Dr Dilts, is focused on improving the efficiency of clinical research trials. His firm, Dilts & Partners, is dedicated to reducing the time to open and run trials. In this capacity, he's worked with the National Cancer Institute of the United States to revolutionise their approach to clinical trials. In fact, in 2011, he was awarded the National Institute of Health's Award of Merit for his role in developing a web-based tool to help researchers recruit participants into NIH clinical trials. But he's worked in many other industries as well, automotive to athletics to oncology, for many products, including even the Trident II D5 fleet ballistic missile. He has a unique perspective on solving the challenges of clinical trials. He's going to share those with us tonight. Please welcome Dr. Dr Dilts.
Thank you. I had no idea how humbling it would be to talk after people win awards. Because you sit there going, and what exactly have I done with my career? Really? Jeez. I find it, the kind of things that people have done that won awards today are absolutely amazing and incredibly impressive. And I find it even more impressive because I couldn't even think about doing it. Okay? So my talk today is not about specific cancer or medical research. My talk today is the processes it takes to get ready to do research, okay? So the title of my talk is basically Observations on Cancer Research from a Non-Cancer Researcher. So one thing you should know about me is I detest podiums. So I'm going to wander all over the place, and I've already warned the camera person that be careful because I go fast, okay? So, okay. So number one, I'm not a doctor. I'm a PhD, but that doesn't count. I'm not a doctor. I'm not an engineer. All my degrees are from business. So what in the world could I tell anybody that does cancer research? Well, hang on, because I approach the problem of cancer from a totally different perspective than medical doctors. And that's what adds value. Now, oh my God, they're broadcasting me. Don't broadcast me, for goodness sakes. There we go, okay. I will never discover the cure for cancer, which is okay with me because I'm just not that smart. However, I have incredible admiration for the people who do basic research. Basically, I suffer from bleeding ulcers. A year ago, I was in a hospital with bleeding ulcers. So the two Australians that I really, really love are these two guys. Okay? However, I have to tell you, I just moved back to Nashville, Tennessee, so Nicole Kidman is right up there with them, okay? All right. Don't do that. Don't look at me. For God's sakes, it freaks me out. I always look at that and go, geez, he's got a lot of gray hair, doesn't he? All right, if you want me, I'll stand here. Fine, okay. So, I don't think the way other people think. I think differently. If you've ever seen... Wait a minute, I have to stand here while he takes my picture. Hi, okay, thank you, yes. By the way, the reason I do that is because one time I was talking to a group and I'm holding a microphone going, and you need to, and people took my picture and you look like a Baptist preacher. Y'all want to come down. So, okay. You're medical researchers. You think of Hawkeye as your gold standard. Hawkeye is the hero. Hawkeye's the one that saves all the patients. I think of radar. How did you make sure that Hawkeye had all his scalpels? How did you make sure that all the equipment worked? I study how radar does his job. Okay? That's what I do. I will tell you how weird I am. I showed up here at 5 o'clock to watch how the caterers work. Okay? The catering staff is phenomenal because they post everything they've got on a board that talks about everybody's dietary requirements, and they can see it all on a piece of paper. It's all visible. That is incredibly impressive about how they do things. So if you're going to study radar as opposed to Hawkeye, you look at research from a very different perspective, and that's what I do. So I look at it from a very, very different perspective. Research is like raising a child, and this is a picture of my second granddaughter when she was born. It's the most enjoyable, frustrating, maddening, time-consuming, delightful, and unexpected journey you're ever going to go on. So I'm going to talk to you about my journey in oncology and how it has changed perspectives both of myself and on how you do cancer research in America. Okay. As you see, I study lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of different industries, and I have two specific research questions. How do you integrate how other people put all the pieces of the problem together? Now, integration sounds like a very simple thing, except if any of you go to France and you discover that they spent 15 billion euros on trains that don't fit in the stations. Okay? So integration, which is what I study, is how to make sure all the pieces actually fit together and harmonize. That's a difficult problem. The other thing I look about is how do I figure out the good things and the bad things that other people did. If you look at the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see the name of a company called Daimler Chrysler, which was the stupidest marriage on the face of the planet. $29 billion later, they figured they shouldn't have gotten married. Okay? You see another little company called Kodak. Anybody remember Kodak? Okay? I study how people do things right or wrong, and specifically, everybody I talk to is special. You don't understand what it's like doing cancer research in Australia. You don't understand what it's like doing cancer research in New South Wales, Australia. You don't understand. Everybody is absolutely unique and special. That's not the part of the problem I worry about. 10% to 20% of what you do is absolutely special. I work about 80%. We're all the same. Because you know what? The way you do clinical research in Australia has exactly the same problems the way that you do clinical research in America. All right? That's the kind of things that I study. Now, to let you know a little bit about my background, before I started in cancer research, I decided, actually I was working on the Trident nuclear ballistic missile. We were converting it to peaceful purposes. So if you in cancer think you're on a hard problem, what the heck do you do with this? Right? And by the way, I'll let you know that we really did come up with an answer, but people are like, what? Okay. And this guy right here, I blame him. His name is Alan Sandler, and he called me and he said, hey, the National Institutes of Health have issued a grant proposal. I need somebody that knows something about how to deal with the problem of accruals. And I said, cool, what's an accrual? And he said, that's people that go on clinical trials. I said, okay, cool, what's a clinical trial? And he said, and he explained all this stuff to me. I said, okay, that's fine. We wrote up this wonderful research grant, and we didn't get funded. And I said, wow, this is an interesting problem. I'm a full professor in business school. I'm a full professor in engineering. I can do whatever I damn well please. Let's do the problem anyway. And he's like, we didn't get any money. And I said, I don't care. Let's study the problem. So Alan, God love him, said, this guy's a little weird, but I'll work with him. And I sat him in a room and all his research staff, and I said, tell me exactly what it takes to go from the time you have an idea until the time you publish your results. And I have one particular tool I use called a process map, which lists out all the steps. Okay, this is a process map. Way at the upper corner right over here is when he has the idea. Way over here is where he publishes the results. And when you lay all this stuff out, you say, when do you start a clinical trial? That's when you start a clinical trial. What did everybody in oncology care about? Is once the trial was open, how do I get accruals? How do I manage it? What do I do? Yada, 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 yada. Nobody looked at how long it took to set up to work. Any of you got teenagers? Any ever watch a teenager get ready to work? Get ready to study? Right? That's what I studied. Because they spent most of the time getting ready to study as opposed to studying. What we discovered in America, and I'm sure it's not true in Australia, you do things much more efficiently than we do in the United States, about half the time of doing research was getting ready to do research. If you're going to complain about patients not showing up for study or for a clinical trial and you haven't even, you've thought all this time about it, it's ridiculous. The amount of time it takes to do work is roughly equivalent as the amount of time it took to set up to do the work. That then said to be, we need to focus on how long it takes to get ready to do the work, a la the setup time. So that's the kind of stuff I study. And he said, oh my goodness, you've got to present this to the American Society of Clinical Oncology. And I'm like, sure, who the heck are they? And he said, oh. So I said, okay, we have to write it up, we have to do a poster. And I presented a poster, and I'm standing in my poster, and those in academics can understand this. I'm standing in my poster, and I've got all my little poster presentation stuff, sit over here, and this woman walks by. And she looks at my poster, and she goes, oh my God, that's the problem. And she goes over, and she grabs this guy in a suit, and she drags him over to my poster, and she goes, you have to fix that. It is your, and she is in this guy's face because and I'm like, oh my God, these cancer people are passionate. I'm going to stay away. It's going to be incredibly important. Her name is Nancy Roche. She's a patient advocate. The guy she grabbed was Jim Doroshow, who's the deputy director of the National Cancer Institute, which, by the way, meant zero to me. And Jim Doroshow says, do you suppose this is the same problem they have with a cooperative group? And I'm going, I have no idea what a cooperative group is, but sure, yeah, I think it's the same problem. All right? So he asked me to study the cooperative group. And I said, sure, I'll study how to set up a study cooperative group. This is what it looks like to open a clinical trial. You have an idea, you get the idea reviewed, you develop a protocol, which is actually the trial, you get that reviewed, you develop the forms, and that's reviewed, you get money, and that's reviewed, and you get the regulatory affairs, you have ethics review board, and then everybody says, yes, okay. At a high level, life is good and life is interesting. But that's not what people really do. I study what people really do. You know what happens when you study what people really do? You end up with a process map that's 50 feet by 5 feet in 8-point font. Okay? All the researchers in the back are going, yeah, I understand that part. Okay. That's not the problem. I said, aha, you can then get a patient on study. And they said, oh, God, no, we can't. Because we have to have the government involved, which is called the Cancer Therapy Evaluation Program, which is another 45 feet. And I said, oh, thank God, you can now get a patient. They said, oh, no, you can't. Because we have to have the cancer centers, which is another 37 feet. Okay? And because I know the people in New South Wales are smarter than people in America, this is 40 meters. Right? You want to know the most disturbing thing about this? Nobody had a clue. Nobody knew. They had to take some schmuck like me to say, how long does it really take, guys? All they knew is it took too long. That's insane. I said, okay, let's look at this stuff. Now, is this what clinical research looks to you? Snakes and ladders? Or what I like even better is this. Minister. People will come to you and say, Minister, you have to give us more money. Because, Minister, we have to move those little blue balls around much faster. Please, Minister, give us more money. One thing I want you to notice, how many blue balls actually leave the system? None. But people are incredibly busy. I'm an old manufacturing guy. I pay for performance. Stuff actually left the plant. Hello. All right? Don't pay for people being busy. Now, how many steps did it take? Hundreds and hundreds of steps. Decision points, roughly over 150 steps. How many different potential loops that could you have? 68. How many groups or individuals have to approve before you say go forward? 38. If you're doing basic research, let me put this in perspective. 38 people have to approve before you can run a test. Now do you know why it takes so long and so expensive to do clinical research? Or the thing I particularly like is this. I'd like to stall this project into the ground, hand it over to one of our action committees. Okay, Or as Wernher von Braun said, we can lick gravity, but sometimes the paperwork is overwhelming. Okay. When you look at this, how many times do you think people are checking, rechecking, checking, rechecking, rechecking where somebody else checked because you're going to check it? Right? I, because I'm a number cruncher, actually counted it. It's about 50% of this stuff. People check that somebody else checked, who somebody else will check. I have to give a story. I said, why do you have 3 separate scientific reviews? Why don't you give everybody in the same room and have them discuss it? And they said, oh my God, that could never happen. And I said, why not? And they said, because they're in a different building. Okay. Let me give my most favorite story about systems and setups, okay? Every system, no matter what it is, has got vestiges. In 1939, Germany was going to invade England, and England took every piece of field artillery they had and shipped it over to the coast because they didn't want to be invaded. And the first sergeant, who was brilliant, read the manual. And as they read the manual, he told all of his crew exactly what to do. So his crew did exactly what it said, and at one point in time, 2 of the soldiers stood just like this at attention. And boom, the field artillery would go off and life was good. And the first sergeant had this brilliant idea. He said, okay, I'm going to get an old World War I vet to see if we're doing it right. So he brought the World War I vet over and he said, okay, are we doing it right? And the World War I looks at him and goes, yes, 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 you're doing it right. And the first sergeant says, I have to ask you, what are those people over there doing? And the World War vet went, oh, they're holding the horses. Because in World War I, the way you moved artillery pieces was with horses, and people had to hold the horses in case they shied, okay? How many times in your system are you holding the horses? You're doing things because you did them, not because they make any sense anymore, okay? Now, I've read your 2 reports. I find that both the reports that happened in New South Wales and the report that happened for Australia absolutely invigorating. To reduce the barriers of clinical trial to faster startup, to develop an online approval process for the workflow. That is phenomenally important. And if you do that, you will lead the world in how to do clinical research, okay? As a researcher, you do serendipitous research. I'm merely going along doing my process maps, and I said, by the way, you're all successful at accruing to your trials, aren't you? And they went, no, we're not. And I said, wait a minute, excuse me? And they said, we don't always get enough patients. And I said, wow, that's interesting. Well, come to find out, we plotted how much, whether you actually achieved your accrual goals. You see, these made 100% accrual goals, and these down here didn't achieve their accrual goals. And we said, okay, suppose all you did was separate based upon the time it took to open a trial. The blue are the trials that opened in less than the median time. The red are the trials that opened in more than the median time. Guess what? You do not open a trial on time, nobody shows up, okay? I don't care how dedicated your physicians are. I don't care how dedicated your research nurses are. It doesn't make any difference because it wasn't in a proper time frame. Well, by the way, the National Cancer Institute absolutely said, no, that can't be possible. So we said, fine, give us the data. We took all of the data and we found out it's exactly this case with thousands of cancer clinical trials. If you don't open the trial in a natural time frame, nobody shows up. I'm a business guy. You know another business that nobody shows up if you're not at the right time is the fashion industry. Cancer research is a fashion business, which means you better be very quick, very fast with the new molecule or the new drug or the new treatment, because if it takes too long, nobody's going to care about it anymore. Which meant if you want to get increased accruals to your clinical trials, open them quickly. Make sure they're safe, but open them quickly and people will accrue. Again, you still need to have the dedicated clinicians at the other end, but if you open them quickly, life will be very good for you. Okay? How many times do you do stuff that doesn't work? 6 of the major top 10 cancer centers in America, 29% of the things they do result in 0 accruals. Nobody shows up. When I talk to the people in the clinical trials office, I say, let me put that in perspective. You could go on vacation and holiday one day every week and no one would notice. Okay? Another third accrue less than 5 patients. How much science can you actually get done with less than 5 patients? Almost none. Okay? When solving the problems of accrual, it's not because the staff is not dedicated, it's because nobody cares about it anymore because you took too long to open. It's a very interesting solution, okay? How much does it cost to have trials that don't accrue anybody? $1 million a pop per site. That's a lot of money just to say we have a trial open. Note, there's some trials you have to open, like pediatric oncology trials. You have to open because they're important. But $1 million a pop, you need to consider what you're doing, okay? I like controlling the inflow. Lots of people have different ideas. You need to control what happens. I studied one group. They had about 44 letters of intent, ideas that came in, of which they accepted about 70%. They had 75 concepts or protocols in work at any time, and they actually generated about 18 per year. I'm a systems engineer. If you got 75 you're working on and you generate 18 a year, that means you've got 4 years before you're going to clear the queue out. Okay? And I taught them, and my big message to oncology cooperative groups is, are you ready for this? Just say no. Okay? Just stop getting things in the system. And boy, did people push back on that. So I said, okay, here's the thing you need to worry about is, you quote Mahatma Gandhi, a no uttered from the deepest conviction is better and greater than a yes merely uttered to please, or what's worse, to avoid trouble. Don't have systems. Somebody's applauding. Yay! What do you do by accepting a trial that's never going to accrue? You waste a lot of time, waste a lot of money, and get everybody upset. You might as well not do it in the first place. Okay. How much time did it take? Basically, it took about 2.5 years. That's not the problem. It took anywhere from over a year to almost 7 years to do. The variance is the killer. So we studied how long it actually took to open, and each one of these bars is an individual clinical trial. When you talk to every single investigator will say, the green bar is the ethics review board, and they held up my study. And every ethics review board will call a different set of data, which is the red bar, to say that's how long the investigator sat on it. Right? Nobody talks about how long it took for scientific review. But what I want to impress upon you is look at the differences in the dimensions of the bars. Look at the differences in the width of the red bars. Look at the differences in the width of the blue bars. What kills you is the variance because it's unpredictable. If it's unpredictable, I can't plan for it. If I can't plan for it, I don't know what's going to happen. Okay? And high variance equals high uncertainty equals high dissatisfaction. People get really, really, really upset about that. Okay? This is staffing levels using roughly the same solid tumor care. This is the difference in staffing level. The variance is amazing to me. Now, minister. When people say, give us more money, oh my God, give us more money. We simulated what would happen if we doubled a cooperative group budget. What would it reduce in the time it took to open a study? And the answer was almost nothing. But I love this. Rich Shilsky, who I truly, truly admire, says, but give us the money anyway. So we studied what happens if people just agreed to agree. All the various participants got together and said, what does it take to actually do it together, and agreed on a priority. If you actually agreed with zero, no extra funding, you're going to open 20% more studies. The time it takes to open is going to drop from over 800 to 252 days. And the variance, again, is going to drop to plus or minus a month. As a researcher, I can deal with plus or minus a month. I can't deal with plus or minus years. Okay? Again, zero money. At this point in time, David is wanting me to get off the stage as soon as physically possible. Okay? All right. Gentlemen, we have run out of money. Now we need to think. Okay. What the National Cancer Institute did, thank gosh, is they said, okay, fine. If you don't open a trial, we'll give you 300 working days, or basically 2 years. If you don't open it for 2 years, we're not going to give you any money, period. You know what happened when they did that? It was amazing. Every single trial got open within 2 years. Right? They've since dropped it to 18 months. And you know what's happened? Every single trial opens in 18 months. Right? If you're a fashion industry and time makes a difference, you have to open things fast. Which means the way you design the Radar O'Reilly infrastructure is totally different. Okay? Now, I look at how to put all the pieces together, the mission, the scientific importance, the operation feasibility, and resource allocation. And I'm going to go fairly fast because this little monitor is saying I'm way the heck over time. Science is great. But science isn't the whole story for accruals. I'm a professor in Portland, Oregon. Portland, Oregon has 92% Caucasians. Okay? Somebody proposed a wonderful sickle cell anemia study that only affects African Americans in our town. And it's like, that's a great study, but you know what? It ain't gonna work. I now live in Nashville, Tennessee. That would be a bestseller, okay? It's operationally, you can't make it work. Where do you spend your money? We plotted out where we spent the money, and come to find out where they spent their money is not exactly where they thought they're gonna spend the money. And the question is, are these the most important trials? They were shocked, absolutely shocked at how much money they were spending on different trials. It's not to say this was not a good trial. It was the fact it took 20% of their entire budget to do this one trial. That's a lot of money, okay? Are you in New South Wales in Australia uniquely qualified to answer the world's call? And I have to tell you honestly, in my short time here in Sydney, I have been amazingly impressed about what you can do. You are in several dimensions uniquely qualified to beat the living tar out of us in America. And I really hope you do. Okay, now I'm about to channel George Bush, if you're going to be like that. Yeah, okay? But you cannot beat us by doing what we do. You will lose, because we're bigger than you are. You do what the Japanese did when they attacked the US automotive industry. You beat us where we're not. You know how the Japanese did that? By focusing on setups. Okay? So that's what you have to think about doing. Really quickly, very, very quickly, why is clinical research separate from other clinical activity? Why not make it an embedded part of clinical activity? And the University of California system asked us to study that. So let me give you an example of what the problem is in a microcosm of having people work together. I give grand rounds talks, which means universities ask me to come and give a talk. And one university asked me to give a talk, and they sent me a piece of paper, and I immediately turned around and sent it back. And they said, thank you very much, and they immediately sent me 4 more pieces of paper. And I said, aha, you are now going to be a good, bad example. Okay? In 4 pieces of paper, I had to supply my name and address 3 different ways. I had to supply my audiovisual requirements 3 different ways. And anybody that knows me know I said, aha, I need 35mm slides, I need PowerPoint, I don't need anything, and then I showed up to see who won. Okay? If you're doing exactly the same thing 3 different times in only slightly different ways, how much effort is wasted, and what's the chance of making a mistake? Your medical oncologist put medical information in slightly differently than your surgical oncologist, which put in information slightly differently than your radiation oncology. The same stuff, just a little different, okay? So we actually mapped it out, we laid it out, and we found out that at the overall perspective it's okay, but each deadly element is inconsistent. There's duplication missing, who's responsible for it, and the data is almost garbage because nobody believes in it because they already recreated it. So we put in a proposal to, oh, by the way, let me give you another story. Airbus built half of the plane in Germany, half of the plane in France, shipped it, and said, put it together, and what they discovered is 300 miles of wire and 40,000 connectors didn't quite fit. Right? By the way, it was all electronic. If you expect that in an all-electronic health record is going to solve your problem, you're in trouble, okay? Because it didn't fit. Now, We tried to build a system to say, trust in the system, and I have to unfortunately tell you that just before this meeting, I heard that the state of California is not going to fund us to do this. Dang. So this is an opportunity for you. Build a system that has who owns the data, what elements should be captured, and when should they do it. And if you build that, you will be the class of the world, period. Okay? So, final words. To the scientists in the room, I truly do admire what you do, but you have to realize every good idea cannot be made into a clinical trial. It's too expensive. To the clinical trial staff office, core labs, and other trial supporters, you are the unsung heroes. You are the people, you are the Radar O'Reillys that make everything go well. But ask every time you do something, is this truly necessary? Don't ask to say, this is what we do because we do it. It's got to be truly necessary. To those administrators who are trying to deal with the shoals of, it's too expensive, we have to compete internationally, it's really, really difficult, you've got to think differently. To government officials and business folks who are sitting in the audience, don't just send money. This is Daffodil Day, which I truly think is absolutely great. You're giving money. That's not what David needs. He needs people who know about systems engineering. He needs people who know about marketing. He needs all of the expertise that's sitting embedded in this room to how to make cancer research better. That's by far the best way of contributing to cancer research today. To basically the people in New South Wales and Australia, I am incredibly impressed at the excellence with which you do cancer research. New South Wales has got the best cancer-reported statistics on the planet. And that's because of your researchers and the dedication you have. Your job is to keep holding people's feet to the fire and say, keep it up, because you're doing an outstanding job. And thank you. Sorry I ran long. I'm sorry. I apologize I ran long.
You want a quick question?
Sure.
Thank you very much, David. As the main meals are being served, a couple of quick questions I want to ask you there. You talk a bit about your broader career. You've researched everything from cancer to cars, world-class track and field athletes to flowers, disposable cameras to Trident ballistic missiles. So you're either an amazing polymath or you get bored very easily. How does oncology research compare in terms of effectiveness, efficiency to some of those other industries and areas that you've looked at?
You're about the same. Basically, what happens is you work really hard to be really effective, but you don't look at the systems perspective, and you need to look at the systems perspective, and that will give you the biggest bang for the buck. Okay? So I used to work with FTD, and they have exactly the same problems. How do I get things to people, to customers that I want? So you look very much the same. Okay?
You talk about money and money being given out. I do note that your work has received over $20 million in grants over the last decade.
But I'm always willing to have more.
Yep. Well, in Australia, that means you'll have to buy the drinks at the after party. But you yourself must have quite a skill at encouraging people to invest in your work.
Okay, to all the researchers in the audience, I apologize. The way I get money is I say, hi, I'm David Dilts. What's your problem? And he'll tell me the problem. I said, you know what? I can solve that by doing this. Do you want me to do it?
Love that.
And he'll say, yes or no. And I'll say, this is how much it's going to cost. And he'll go, oh my God, that's too expensive. And I'll say, thank you very much. And I'll leave. Or he says, not a problem. Let's do it. Cancer researchers, my typical grant proposal is 3 pages. It's funded in 48 hours. Okay? I don't write grants based upon what you might do. I write basically, you ask me, I tell you what I can do. You either say yes or no. If you say no, I don't do it anymore. Why in the world do you have the most brilliant people on the planet writing grants that are not going to succeed? Those are all the researchers in the audience.
Absolutely.
Okay? It's insane. It's absolutely ludicrous. Talk to the people who have the money to say, is this what you want to do? If the answer is yes, then do it. If the answer is no, then don't worry about it. Okay? By the way, I'm a heretic. I know it's going to be surprising to you, but I'm a heretic about that kind of stuff. I get money by asking people, and they either say yes or they say no. If they say no, I say no harm, not a problem. If they say yes, then we go and do it. Okay? So, again, I abhor the grant system, where you spend months writing up a grant, you submit it, and they look at it, and then they tell you, in America, they give you what's called a fundable score, which I call, we might fund you if we like you. And you don't know where they fund you for months. How much of your precious research intelligence is wasted by people waiting? That's a horrible system you need to resolve, okay?
All right, you've given us lots of things to talk about and think about. Thank you so much for being our guest speaker tonight. Give Dr. David Dilts another round of applause. Well done, David.
Thank you so much.
Fascinating
Thank
stuff.
You. Thank you.